we just finished Act 1. The progression is very simple. What I did with my skill tree was I rushed through this node here. I picked up some dexterity to get into the living death for the revive and minion HP. Then I walked up here, Gravedigger. I'll be picking up necroticized flesh. And then I'll probably take attributes nodes when I need it for my skill gems. And when I don't need attributes, I will go through this node up to Relentless Flesh. And then through the right side, most likely, I guess, is damage nodes to pick up Fear of Death. Unless I save them, those two extras. Actually, it's two either way. So I'll do the right side around to get this node. Once that's done, I'll continue the pathing I've already done here to go for this circle here. That's the skill tree progression. We are currently level 16. Skill gems I've been using. I would say that in Act 1, you should use Essence Drain and Contagion to level with. And then once you do the Fraythorn in Act 1, which is in Hunting Grounds, just follow the round there, get access to Fraythorn. Once you finish this, you get your first Uncut Spirit Gem. Check the Sorcerer skills to get yourself Radiant Spirits. Don't forget to right-click this to activate it. It costs 30 Spirits. Now your Fire skills, based on Projectiles or AoE, will summon Radiant Spirits. And then you use that with Flame Wall, which is also from the Sorcerer skill. You want to use that with Magnified Effect, and later you'll pick up Arcane Tempo to make it faster. After that, I'm not using Arsonist, by the way. You want to have Skeletal Warriors with Meat Shield, Elemental Army. Your SRS should have Fire Infusion. Skeletal Sniper, I'm running Corrosion in there. It actually doesn't matter at all because I'm exploding that fire, so this support doesn't do anything. I have Unearth with Persistence, and that's it. And what I'm going to do later is I'm going to move Meat Shield into my Radiant Spirits and Infernal Legion and Minion Instability when I have more links. So I'm going to start exploding with them. That's the current plan. Let's move on with Act 2. So we just finished Act 2. And I'm going to go through some things we've learned, some things we changed, my plans for moving forward, and what I'm about to do right now. So let's start with the skill tree. One of the most important things to think about is that once you get the SRS, these two nodes in the early stage, located right here, Mana Region. It is so helpful. So helpful. And then what we do is we want to go to the right-hand side for the revival, as well as these nodes. But what I did was every step along the way, as I went for these nodes, I would take an attribute node if I needed to get the skill gems. I don't have any on, but I have currently 67 intelligence. So every time I was about to get a new skill gem, or I was going to level some skills up, I would then take the travel nodes and then grab these. That's why I have an extra intelligence node here instead of just filling this tree out, which is what I'm going to do now. So my step now in the skill tree is I'll be taking all of these nodes except for these three. And the reason for that is that I don't need these three, but I will take the AoE and CDR. I'll be grabbing these three. I might get the last three, but I'll grab the other nodes. And every time I need intelligence or attributes to get the support gems or skill gems, I will take a traveling node as I move forward. Now, this is the current planner that we're running, and I've added those two nodes, which means my travel node will go up here, and I have to make a decision whether or not I'm going to go all the way up for the reservation node, or if I'm going to go in here to the side, which is minion recouping damage, which I actually think I'll start with, because one of the most important and annoying problems that we're encountering is when your minions die. So that's basically the plan right now. I'll be posting the skill tree that I have in the descriptions down below, obviously. Skill-wise, added flat damage to allies should be one of the strongest modifiers early game. I actually replaced the scepter I had that gave plus level of minion skills for this, which was significantly better. I also managed to get my hands on Unfolding Dawn, which is plus 100 spirit, which seemed overpowered as crazy as overpowered when you first get it, but it's not that good in reality because we're using SRS. This is essentially gave me one extra minion, which really isn't that much because they tend to die quite a lot because of the early stage of the game. Skill-wise, I was running Skeletal Warriors without supports coming from the actual scepter. I'm running the Infernal Hound, which I'll talk about in a bit of how to get that, because we get the Ascendancy early in Act 2. But I'll talk about that momentarily. In the Infernal Hound, I'm using Lacerate, and not the first support. This is the last support I added to him. But Lacerate, because it allows him to inflict bleed. So when I finally get extra links to my SRS, I'll be adding Bloodlust, which makes them do more damage against targets that's bleeding. More of a single target damage kind of thing. So I added Lacerate. But most importantly, we're using Magnified Effects for more area of effect for the actual damage radius that he has igniting nearby enemies. So we're just ramping that area up. We're still using Unearth. I'm kind of bad, I've realized, when I play and actually making sure that I do use it. It's more of a clearing thing or when you add some bosses. And I'm using Persistent for better duration, and then I'm using Execute to more damage against bosses. So normally a boss would, in many cases that we've seen so far, spawn ads midway through. So they actually are available during a boss fight when the enemy gets to the point of being low life. So that's why I added Execute here. I'm exclusively running Skeletal Mages outside of the Skeletal Warriors provided by the Scepter. In these, I'm using Encumbrance first to basically use them as CC units to provide slows on enemies with better slow magnitude, whilst my SRS are dealing all the damage. And then later, I added Control Instructions to allow their hits to do more damage. You can verify their damage by clicking this little arrow and go to their ice chart. You see their actual total damage now is 5579. I unequip this. Then the damage goes down to 4261. So very easy to verify these things. However, modifiers like my Scepter that says allies in your presence deal more damage, that doesn't apply to their tooltip because this is an external buff that is applied outside of their skill gem. So you won't see this in their tooltip. Other skills I'm using, I added Flammability very late. It costs a stupid amount of mana, 81 right now. So I wouldn't recommend picking this up early. I actually leveled up all of my other skills before I bothered going for the Flammability. I also didn't bother putting any supports on it. We're still running Flame Wall. I prioritized running, actually, Arcane Tempo should be the highest priority to make it faster. And then I added Fortress because I like having the radius of area coverage it provides. Makes it easier for my Frost Mages to shoot Predictors through the Firewall, which will add more damage to them. It's also why we're still bothering to actually scale our Flammability. Now, I do want to point out for both Flammability and Flame Wall, as well as SRS, you have to click the Uncut Skill Gem and click the Sorceress on the left-hand menu to see these skills. So that's how you see them, because a lot of people have been asking how to get them. And then we have Pain Offering, in which I've supported Energy Barrier. It just became available to me because I had so many low-rank support gems, so I just added it. Same thing with the Elemental Army, just so the totem can have some resistances to survive longer. It's only something I used versus extremely hard targets and or bosses. SRS, however, one thing to point out is once you socket this beast, you have to right-click this little button here. You have to right-click it. Otherwise, you can see my spirits. See my spirits? How it's bouncing? You have to make sure it's activated. Same thing with the Ascendancy. Support gems. I added first and foremost Fire Infusion because this applies to all of its SRS damage. They convert 70% of their physical damage to fire. So they have 70 Fizz and 30 Fire. But baseline is 100% Fizz. I see that there's some stuff in the way here on my screen, but I'm talking about it now, so it'll be fine. The other support is Martial Tempo, just because it's a multiplicative attack speed modifier. This was, to my understanding and my experience, the best support gem's approach to it. I'm not sure about the third one. I will very likely look into running the Bloodlust for the bleed, but what I want to do later on is... my plan moving forward is to try to find ways to get more links on my skills. And what I'd like to do is run not Meat Shield because it lowers their damage, but I want to run Minion Instability that makes them explode, and Infernal Legion that makes them take damage, and then run Feeding Frenzy that makes them deal more damage but take more damage so they die faster to then explode. That's kind of like my approach, what I want to do to make them popcorn SRS. But I also want to automate them, which is a meta skill gem called Cast on Minion Death. So you can't support minion summoning abilities in that skill. But what you can do is SRS is not a minion summoning skill. It is a buff that you then have to cast fire skills to summon the SRS. So what I want to do is run Cast on Minion Death with fire skills that would summon the SRS, that would then kill themselves and explode, that will then re-trigger the Cast on Minion Death to then cast more fire skills that would then summon more SRS that would then kill themselves. You get the idea. I want to create this loop. So we'll see if that's possible. That's what I'm going to try to see if we're able to get in the near future moving forward. Anyways, before I round up this Act 2 progression, I will say that some of the bosses feels extremely overtuned. Like, really overtuned. Some of the bosses, you really, really want to make sure you stay in melee range. Such as the Titan bots. Let's see if I can find out where he was. The Flame Titan. Here, the Titan Grotto. Stay in melee range. Because he one-shot me from distance. And as soon as I was in melee range, no problemo. Last boss in the act was the Dreadnought, which was over here. This fight was way easier if I stayed away from the targets. So you'll have to learn the fights and get a grasp of how you can handle them. But some of them felt a bit overtuned, especially this one. And once you stayed in melee range, the Titan didn't feel bad. He was overpowered if you stayed away from him. In melee range, you were fine. And this one was didn't matter what you did. This felt really hard towards the end. So that's one thing to point out. Act 2, however, early Act 2, like a couple of quests in, you'll get access to the Trial of Sekimas. Now, I hate Sanctum, and I don't like it in this in PoE2 either. You get this available at level 22. If you don't feel like you're doing really well with damage output, and or that you might feel like you're not really comfortable with your movement skills, I would wait with this trial because it's optional. Do it when you're like level 24, 25 instead. If you're feeling confident, do it to 22. Because you have to go through the entire first set of a Sanctum mechanic to get access to the boss. And the boss was the hard part. Everything else was kind of fine. Because the room gets kind of cluttered and you're going to start taking hits if you don't kill him fast enough. And that's going to limit the amount of time the amount of hits you can take before you get kicked out because you lost all your honor. I did it barely at level 22, so I would recommend waiting a little bit, but that's how you get access to the first Ascension. And the first Ascension node I picked up is obviously the Infernal Hound, which I talked about earlier. But that is the roundup of Act 2. I'm going to begin Act 3, and I'll make one of these more snippets for Act 3 as well. I'm sure Kickers will upload all of these together for YouTube to be a little bit easier to digest than watching this live on stream. That's about it. Might as well tell you that if you're watching this on YouTube, I'd appreciate if you hit the like button and subscribe for more content. But let's move on to Act 3. Hello! We have now finished Act 3 and are back on the beach since 4, 5, 6 are not in early access at the time of this recording. We just finished Act 3 with our Infernalist, and as you might have noticed, a lot has changed. So, first off, we have made no changes to the skill tree as of Act 2. However, the progression of my planning on the skill tree was to, instead of going for these nodes, I went straight up. Picked up Lord of Horrors as well as the Left Hand of the Darkness. I will say the Lord of Horrors did not get me one extra minion. I don't think that this is a node one should rush. So I regret going up here between Act 2 and finishing Act 3. I felt like it was kind of wasted. What I instead started feeling was two things. I wish I had a little bit more damage, but the changes we made to the build made it do stupid damage, which was insane to see. But most importantly, I started feeling like I have to start looking at my own personal defenses. So I am actually right now moving into damage recoup and this node right here. So that is the current plan that I'm going for. And as you progress, you can actually grab this node, which gives you extra life mana and energy shield as well. However, there are some other defensive nodes that we could pick up. These nodes here are for your minions defenses, and same thing with this, as well as this. So these are later. I'm not going to focus on them right now. I felt pretty fine with it. But for our personal defenses, we do have access to these 6 nodes. These here are just damage recoup nodes. And this one is elemental damage recoup, but this is physical damage recoup. So that's something I'd like to look into focusing on personally. However, my gear is... I barely upgraded my gear. My weapon got pretty decent. I did get an Unfolding Dawn. But rest of the gear, I found easy in Act 1. So a lot of the gear is really, really, really bad. Again, I think that instead of going up here, I would have instead preferred to take these 4 nodes and then started taking these recoup nodes, then moved up there. Simply because the Lord of Horrors won't really be something we care too much about until we get higher gear with more spirit. So for now, it didn't feel like that. It was super, super important. So that's probably the only change I would have done on the skill tree in my progression. Skill-wise, I ended up in a position where I was doing the whole SRS thing. I wanted to test the SRS auto bomber setup to verify if it works. It works. And I'm going to show you. It's hilarious. But people told me that the Skeletal Reaver was in fact not good. Now, it turns out the Reaver is ridiculously good. So we've been using Skeletal Frost Mages, which I used for the CC approach. It was very comfortable, and it felt really good. And I've been enjoying that quite a lot.
Oh shit.
However,
dropping some serious cash to support the stream. Thanks for the love, Spool-A.
Thanks so much, man. However, we're in a position where I'm going to talk about the skill gems, the supports, and what we did. I moved away from them and started using Reaver skeletons. It worked very well. The problem is that these skeletal Reavers, they have an ability called Command Rage. And what that does is essentially kill them. Now, if I pop the Reaver now, these guys are now degenerating HP, but because I'm not in combat, they're actually getting their HP back, so they're not dying. But if I go into a fight, pop the Reaver's ability, they do stupidly good damage, but they're going to start degenerating. So what I did instead was that I only used it versus bosses when they were heavy stunned to do as much damage as I possibly could. And that basically made fights turn into a joke. It was absolutely incredible. However, we also had the assistance of our auto-bombing loop for SRS, which looks like this, which is hilarious. I'm going to turn this off so we can actually listen to what I'm saying. Here we go. So, how does this work? The auto-bombing loop is using Raging Spirits, which is not a skill that you summon. It is a buff/aura, and they are then summoned by you casting fire skills like Flame Wall, Fireball, Solar Orb, whatever you want to call it, the fire, the Ember, Fire, Fusillade, or whatever. We're supporting them with Feeding Frenzy, and I only got one Jeweler Orb, so you don't need Feeding Frenzy if you don't have a 3-link, which makes them take more damage. Then I use that with Minion Instability and Infernal Legion. Infernal Legion makes them take damage, and then when they're 35% or lower in HP, Minion Instability will make them explode. So how do we then summon the SRSs? Well, in my case, we just make sure we kill them, which we can do with Pain Offering. So if I cast Pain Offering, after a few seconds, one of these skeletons will die, which will give me energy on cast on Minion Death, which is what we're going to be utilizing. This costs 60 Spirit Reservation, which is linked with Flame Wall, which I have with Fortress. So I can show you how that looks. I'll impale a minion. Actually, you have to impale 2 minions to start this. Once this impale is over, or I kill them with the Enrage, now I summoned a Firewall, which summoned Raging Spirits. Once those Raging Spirits dies, I get more energy back. Sometimes this loop stops because you don't get enough minions depending on the area. This was a tight corner, so the Firewall didn't summon enough to get the minions back. On bosses, this is not a problem. You have this loop going 24/7. All you have to look at is your mana to give your mana cost a little bit. And that's where the Reaver comes in. So you just, every time it stops, you just make sure you suicide your minions by doing tons of damage. Then they die. And when they die, you have all of your SRSs popping 24/7. It's been beautiful to play with this. So, skill-wise, we have, again, just the 2 regular-ass skeletons from our Scepter. Same Scepter as we're using for a few acts now. We have our Doggo, which seems to have gotten a link, which is not done in the form of me using an orb on it. So I think this is like level-based that gave it a 3rd link. I don't know. I'll have to verify in the next act. Essentially, I'm using Magnified Effect still for the increased area effect. We're using Fire Infusion now, and I'm using Splinter. Splinter makes it so that enemies, the hits that this minion is doing is actually shredding or breaking armor. My plan is to use this on my Reavers because they attack very fast when I get a 3-link on this. However, for now, I'm using the Splinter. I actually don't know really what kind of support gem I would use in the Infernal Hound for now when it comes to replacing the Splinter. We'll see what I'll do when I get there. We're also using Bone Storm. And Bone Storm looks like this, where you can charge this up. You can do this whilst moving, and then you can shoot these projectiles out. And what they'll do is that they increase the amount of damage taken by the enemy. This is supported with Arcane Tempo for cast speed, and I have Ricochet, which is just a bonus. It didn't add any mana cost to it, so I figured why not. Other skills we're using is Vulnerability. I did add Ritualistic Curse, which just makes the curse a little bigger, makes it a little easier to hit, and that's about it. And we're using this instead of Flammability because our main source of damage is not just the ASRS auto-bombing, but it is in fact our Reavers, that damage output from their auto attacks. Besides this, we're using Raging Spirits, like I mentioned earlier, with the same supports. A Pain Offering, same supports as before, just an Energy Barrier and some Elemental Army for resistances. And that's about it. I only use this for bosses. ADP, even then, I tend to forget it, but it's pretty decent to use. Skeletal Reaver is supported with Martial Tempo for the attack speed, and we have Heavy Swing, when you get access to it as their second support, which is more melee physical damage with less attack speed. They already attack very, very fast. This is not a problem. And we have then cast a minion death. So that's the setup I've been using. It's been working out very, very, very well. The only problem I started encountering was at the end of Act 3, I felt like I was suffering a bit on my defensive aspect. And I think it's a lot about gearing. I think I maybe should have used some of my more currency and try to upgrade my gear a bit better. Resistance-wise, I'm sitting on negative, well, not negative, but 0 chaos res and very low lightning and cold resistance. Fire was fine. The rest was a little bit better, but because now I'm in cruel difficulty. But I think that if I would have moved these nodes into taking the 4 nodes down here for damage and then actually went for recoup, I would have had less of an issue with this. So that's one of the things I would have done. So now I'm just, because I did this, I'm going to take these nodes. And when I have these, I'm going to grab that node. Then I'll take this, or other way around. I'm not really sure. We'll see how it feels. But I will be keeping an eye out on getting my resistances better covered and getting more HP across the board on all my gear. So I will be spending my currency orbs. Maybe I'll even gamble some because I got 35,000 gold. So we'll see how I'm going to do it, because I think I've been tunnel visioning offensive scaling a little bit too much. But other than that, the build's been fantastic. And it's just incredible how insane it's been versus bosses. I basically go in, I pop my curse, pop my make sure my SRS auto bombing rotation is running. And then as soon as the boss becomes heavy stunned, I just pop the reverse command to enrage them, and bosses just melt. It's been insane to go through. Anyways, that's the recap for this. I believe my editor will be posting Act 1, 2, and 3 on YouTube, so this will probably be the last part for this video, and we're going to be looking into doing yet another one where we do the cruel difficulty 4, 5, 6, but it's 1, 2, 3 repeat, right? And I'll keep doing these videos, and we're going to see what I'm going to do moving forward. My plan right now is actually to look into the possibility of getting the skeletal cleric, which is the healing skeleton. And I believe that's going to be the first step upon which I will move away from SRS autobombing and focus exclusively on the physical damage portion. However, there's a node over here that makes the minions do % of their physical as extra chaos damage, which will also be making this node attractive, where they apply Withered. Now, Withered, what that does is make enemies take increased chaos damage. Now, it's only a small portion of our damage doing chaos, but it does mean that we have the possibility of maybe having Withering hits from the support gem available to maybe 1 or 2 of our side minions, depending on if I'm going to run 1 or 2 of them, and make them actually pump out that extra damage, just to ramp that little extra damage source. But most importantly, what I'll be focusing on in the first round in Act 1 cruel difficulty will be to see how we're going to solve the defensive-oriented approach. Might be gear, might be skill tree, but I'll get you guys updated on this in the next recap. So, hit the like button, subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe, keep rocking, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Good night, everybody.